Very good. It's 1:30, so we'll begin the Liquor Control Committee for today, and we have just a few items on the agenda. Number one is to approve the minutes of the July 16th, 2025 regular meeting. We have the information in front of us. If there are any changes or corrections, otherwise we would accept a motion.
So move.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number two is review liquor applications, and 2A, application to transfer a Class F alcoholic beverage license from La Fiesta Mexican and American Grill LLC, doing business as Casa Mexico Taqueria Express, located at 2511 Kirsten Lane South. And Steve.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. So with this is a Class F license, which allows full alcohol, does not allow a bar, and the food sales must exceed the alcohol sales. Casa Mexico has been in business for some time now, a couple of years, and they're adding an additional person. So we go through the background check on the new person and the existing person also. And went through that background check. There are no issues that were raised, no concerns. One comment, we did get notification from them that they are considering a different DBA. So when it finally does change over, it may not be Casa Mexico. It may have a different DBA. There's still kind of contemplating that. So.
Very good. Any other comments or questions about the change? But it's
Yeah.
basically, go ahead.
Well,
Go ahead,
real quick,
Bob.
so does that mean there's possibly going to be ownership or partnership changes?
No, they'd be the same owners and stuff, just they might, again, they're contemplating, instead of having a Casa Mexico, because there's some other Casa Mexicos in town, so they're contemplating just changing it to a different DBA.
Very good. Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And next is Police Department Monthly Report, the general report with Chief.
Good afternoon, everyone. Start out with a couple of positive things. There's really nothing on the monthly report unless you have questions, but I do want to point out, just give kudos to, I believe it's Bismarck staff. We had an assault there a week or so ago, probably not on this report, but the bouncer there properly detained the individual involved and held them until the officers got there. So I think that was excellent work on their part. It's really what we would hope to see in that partnership with our taverns and our bouncers, et cetera. So that was well done. Otherwise, I think that suspect would have eluded immediate capture. And then the other piece of good news is you are aware we had the windbreak over serving case that was being reviewed by the North Dakota Supreme Court. Back a couple weeks ago, the Supreme Court did decide that our ordinance is not unconstitutional, and further found that the City Commission did not arbitrarily, capriciously, or unreasonably, or they weren't any of those, in finding the windbreak violated that over-serving ordinance. I know that the city attorney is working on the processes for all of that, but I just wanted to inform the board that the ordinance is constitutional and could be enforced.
Very good. Thank you very much. That's great. Do you have any questions? Otherwise, that's it. Thank you,
Okay,
Chief.
thank you.
And next, we'll move on to 4A, consider allowing to-go cocktails, discussion regarding parameters with Lance Thorson and Steve.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. I'll have Lance go up to the other microphone. And Lance and I met and talked about what some of those guardrails or some of those parameters would look like for these to-go cocktails. And so he was just wondering where we're at with that. And I wasn't really, personally, I'm just having a little trouble in my mind, wrapping my mind around it. One of the things that I had asked Lance was, well, could you just sell the mix? And then we don't have to do any ordinance change. There's no alcohol involved. And maybe you can address that.
Yeah, good afternoon. Is this on? Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioner and board members. Yeah, we talked about offering just the mix, and really our intent with this is just to have an add-on feature for people taking food to go. We get a lot of requests for our margaritas, and the fact of selling just the mix just doesn't make it as convenient for our customers to have to go then buy some tequila, and they never seem to make it as good as it is in the restaurant. And so We have been talking about possibly selling the mix in off sales, such as the local Happy Harry's and things. But really, this is an add-on for us, and just due to the number of requests that we get.
And so, Steve, my question is, would we have to change the license that they currently have? Would this change the category of the license?
Like Lance is saying, I think and I haven't really talked about it with the attorneys yet, but in my mind, we would have to modify some of the ordinances to allow drinks to be under certain parameters to be allowed to take off the licensed premise. Those parameters would have to be obviously in some kind of tamper-proof sealed container. Maybe limit the number of ounces or the I guess how large the drinks could be. I don't know if at one time we talked about maybe it had to be a specialty cocktail. Well, then you have one bar that says, well, hey, rum and cokes, they're my specialty, that type of thing. And I don't know. Again, I was having a little more trouble. I had discussions with the limited off sale, and we'd talked about that for a couple of years. So maybe I'm just a little slow and a little too old for this job, but with the limited off sales, I was able to kind of wrap my head around some of the things that they were talking about doing. And when Lance came up with this concept, I'm just having a little trouble wrapping my head around it.
So just to kind of go back in time, so during COVID, we allowed them to do that. It was like a special exemption because everybody was having challenges, in many ways, and so it was temporarily done at that point. My main question about the licenses is, so right now, like at an off sale, they sell cocktail mixes in cans, like at lots of the places, and so to me, that's what that sounds like to me. Do you know what I mean? Whether it's they made it, we already have this, and they have a license for that, and so to me, they have to have that license to sell a mixed thing. But I don't know if anybody else, do you get what I'm saying, Steve? Do you know, I mean, you can go into, I'll use Happy Harry's. They have a whole row of pre-mixed drinks, and that's kind of what we're talking about, correct?
I think it's very similar, except this, as Lance said, this is something that's a specialty of their,
But that's exactly what they sell at the retail. They sell their pre-mixed cocktails. We already have that, and so to me, that's the license that they would have to have, if that makes sense. Maybe I'm not describing it correctly, but we already are doing that in the retail. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. That's already offered, and there is a license that's available for that.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, so a couple questions for you, Lance. Have you done any research on what would be needed federally or statewide with this?
I have not, and I talked with Mr. Sprague about it and just kind of reopened the question since it was allowed during COVID. During that time too, it wasn't just a free-for-all, you can sell whatever you want. You had to sell food along with the purchase. And so I have not looked at the state laws. I guess that's my understanding, is that the city and Nancy would be looking into that further.
Well, first of all, let me say I've always been impressed by your family and your partners,
Thank you.
Businesses and stuff. You've been a big part. And I think what you're trying to do has a lot of logic and could be very smart from the standpoint that a lot of restaurants, whether it goes back to Pete at the Granary that sold his beer cheese soup in a grocery store, or Mexican Village, or Chi-Chi's, or TGI Fridays, have all developed brands that carried their label, et cetera. In a lot of cases, the brands they created outlasted the restaurant, strangely enough. But that aside, I think the web of how the federal government may look at this, or what the rules are. For example, if this is perceived as off-sale, even though, let's say, a carve-out's given to you, or a privilege to say, yeah, this makes sense for our town for him to do this, to me, it would be off-sale, which is kind of what Dave is, well, it's probably exactly what Dave's saying right now. And for example, you'd have to get a federal label approval, which is my understanding, I'm no expert at it, is a horrendous deal. There's about 10 different things that have to be on the label, everything from alcohol content to ingredients. Are there any yellow number 5 dyes in there? Health warnings, a whole bunch of stuff has to be on this package, and it has to be approved. And to go around that can be very bad, because the fines that the feds put on not having your label approved and be selling off-sale alcohol are really big, like up to $26,000 per offense. And there's businesses around the country that have been put out of business overnight by the alcohol, ATF or the TTB or whatever, however that falls now. So I think it's important that you look at that. As far as the state, I think this started with growlers, and the state started growlers as something to help. It was a privilege or a carve-out for actual breweries and then brew pubs, and it's been expanded. So it specifically says in state law, I believe, and again, I could be wrong, but that growlers are for beer. So, and you talked about putting your drinks or your margaritas or whatever in a growler type can or whatever. So I'm not sure the state would be on board with this too. And if you get deemed the manufacturer, that means there would be another level of tax. Probably, because you become a manufacturer, you have to pay state tax and federal tax on what you're creating. It might be worth your time to go down and talk to Joel at Proof Distilling, because he's been through a lot of this stuff, and he probably understands it real well, and you could find out what it would entail. So maybe there's another way you can get this through as, again, a carve-out or a privilege. But if I were you, my recommendation would be is you check off the state and the federal government also. And then my question to Steve would be, before we got to a point to make a motion, would you want that approved from those levels before we took it on, or do we start it here and let it go that way? Or do we just
I
say
think it
that's
makes
up to
sense
them?
that we know that it's allowed in federal and state, rather than allowing it at the city and then having it challenged and find out that it's not allowed by federal or state.
So I think the mix idea is a really good idea. That gets your trademark and your brand out there. I'm not against you or this idea. I just think that you've got a web of stuff you're going to have to climb through to get to that point. But I could be wrong.
Okay, thank you.
No, I think I didn't even think about that, but coming from big box retail, I know that there's been, one of the biggest opportunities is you can have a local vendor that has a great idea, a great product, but to get that to go through, I think, if I can sum it up, or to go through the regular regulations of everything that is needed. Anytime you look at any type of label, what the country of origin, the Julian code, all that other different things to make sure that it's approved. There is a process, and sometimes from a local company to get all those in line to make sure that they get everything approved can be a process. So I would rather do it on the front side rather than do it and then get in trouble from some other organization on the back end.
So Steve, I hopefully you're getting a little more of a direction, and I do think that Nancy, our city attorney, the next step is to just see what exactly is permitted, because this sounds like and I do think we need to maybe meet informally, just to make sure that we're going in the right direction, but there's a lot of technical, legal things I think that we need to make sure of too, before we proceed much further. So does that make sense, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so maybe we're moving a little bit slower than you want us to move, we'll start working on it. And I do think the next step is to maybe have our city attorney see what are the potential limitations, and then we'll meet after that. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that would be great. And again, I have no issues with, we've talked about, being able to, if you can sell them, cutting off and say 10 o'clock is the cutoff time, because I don't want these on the street after bar close either. It's an add-on for our guests that are getting foods. So, no, I just want to continue the discussion and see if it'll work out.
No, and I think you've brought up a good point, and it's a good thing for us to work on. So thank you for doing it. And I do think it'll just help us be a little more knowledgeable about what you can and can't do. So Steve, I hope this kind of refines the direction that we're going in. And I apologize, we maybe should have moved a little bit faster, but But it's kind of complicated, and so I think we kind of know which way to go, and we'll go from there. And so to this point, then if you don't mind being in touch with Steve, and then we'll kind of set something up in the meantime. Is that okay?
That sounds good.
Yeah, Steve, you might have to stay around longer though, so we get this done.
I've got,
Go ahead,
I've
Bob.
got up one other comment that kind of makes me a hypocrite, but, you know, it's interesting in the industry, this emerging categories and stuff, they're calling them to-go drinks. And which is a nice way to say it in my group and growing up and early adult, and maybe even once in a while nowadays, what we really call them are roadies, right? Potentially. You know, we're leaving the bar, let's get a drink. There are bar owners here that have been very, and package store owners have been very intense about trying to limit that, you know, for the city, for the police department, et cetera, whether it's miniatures or et cetera. Because in the old days, you could say, hey, I need one to go, and they'd make you a drink in a plastic glass. Off you'd go. So this is important, I think, from the city, from a, you know, somewhat a safety and ethical point of view too, when we get into this, how it's handled. And it sounds like you're already thinking about that and willing to go with certain restrictions. But this is a category that I think is, you know, at least somewhat dangerous too, to young consumers that think it's okay to have 2 drinks at the bar, oh, we better not drive, but let's take one home, and then they drink it on the way home. Because I think most people in this room have probably been there before. So, thanks.
All right, any other comments or questions? Otherwise, that is all our agenda items, and so go ahead,
Commissioner, you
Steve.
got a couple of add-on items here. Just the annexation, gosh darn it. The B annexation, I think is what we called it. It was on the commission meeting on the other night, and I was on receive and file. And just to catch everybody back up to speed, there were a lot of different issues floating around that Northdale license and an annexation. And so we wrote some parameters to kind of try to control when those would be appropriate, when it would be issued. Put in there that it needs to stay in place in that location for a minimum of 10 years so that they don't get a license from the city and then go move someplace else, and a number of other issues with that. But just kind of a reminder that that's moving forward. And then the limited off sale that we did talk about and that we directed or requested the city commission to direct the city attorney to work on that. Nancy and I have had one meeting with that, and again, it's this you know, unintended consequences that Gary always used to talk about. We need to wrap our minds around some of that and make sure that we're moving forward in a way that makes sense and we're not crossing over paths and doing that kind of stuff. So,
Any other items for the agenda? Otherwise, that's it for today. Thank you. We are adjourned. Have a good afternoon.